For Council President Andrew Friedson, I'm Jordan Lindsay. Reporters, if you still need permission to record, please note that in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can note that in the chat as well, or raise your hand, and I will call on you accordingly. Now I'll toss it to Council President Andrew Friedson for opening remarks. Council President, to you.
Jordan, good morning. Thanks everybody for joining us today. First, I want to begin by recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day as we celebrate and honor Indigenous Americans and commemorate their histories and cultures. The Council first began recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day in 2020 with a resolution led by my friend and former Councilmember Nancy Navarro. This action is a representation of our county's continued commitment to elevate traditionally silenced and marginalized voices. Officially recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day also helps us to move away from a legacy of bigotry and racism against our Native communities. After observing Yom Kippur with my family, I was able to participate in some meaningful community events this weekend. I joined the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, the National Park Service, and an amazing grassroots group of volunteers with Tree Friends United and the Little Falls Watershed Alliance, as well as my friend Glen Echo Mayor Dia Costello, to cut harmful invasive vines at Glen Echo Park. This is part of an effort where over 4,000 volunteers throughout the National Park Service GW Parkway area have stepped up to address the invasive vine challenges in our national parks, and also supplements the weed warriors and some of the other efforts in our county parks and some of our local efforts as well, with Department of Transportation working on some of the invasives along our roadways. It's a growing issue and something that I'm really happy and grateful that we have so many committed volunteers in our community who are willing to step up to help support the cause. I also attended the Gaithersburg Oktoberfest with my good friend Mayor Judd Ashman, and participated in the Spirit Club Fitness Festival alongside Congressman Jamie Raskin, Vice President Kate Stewart, State Senators Craig Zucker and Jeff Waldstreicher, and Delegate Jared Solomon at Temple Emmanuel. It was a great event that showcases health and wellness and the type of inclusive community that we strive to have in Montgomery County. Today, I am extremely excited to join the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Scotland AME Zion Church, which will be hosted by Martin Luther King III, the eldest son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., with a long and storied history of overcoming obstacles, including the devastated flood of July 2019. The 100th anniversary is a momentous opportunity to acknowledge our shared history and celebrate the importance of this historic church, its legacy, families, and the community that has stepped up to build it up. There is a significant project to rebuild the church and to build a community center alongside it to address as part of the restorative justice efforts that we are undertaking. Many of the intentional decisions that were made in the past, I've been proud to be at the center of many of those conversations and discussions, and to work alongside county and state leaders and interfaith coalition led in many ways by Glenn Stone and the Rails family. It's just been an incredible undertaking and a really positive way for us to showcase how we are making with our past, how it can be useful for the present and for the future. And I'm really excited about this 100th anniversary, and really excited about the progress of those efforts to ensure that an important part of our county's history, which is an important part of our country's history, is safeguarded for generations to come. Moving along to the council work, as part of tomorrow's council meeting, we'll begin reviewing the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee's recommendation on the Growth and Infrastructure Policy, formerly known as the Subdivision Staging Policy. We'll be delving into the Planning Board draft of the school and transportation elements and some of the changes that we suggested on the committee that I chair, the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. The policy establishes guiding principles and processes on matters concerning land use development, growth management, and related issues. We want growth in our county to match the ever-increasing needs and demands of our residents, and to ensure that we build the type of sustainable, thriving community that is welcoming to new residents and is supportive of all of our existing residents as well. We have a requirement to ensure that schools, transit, water, and sewer services are adequate public facilities, and it's part of the adequate public facilities ordinance that we're required to undertake. The growth and infrastructure policy creates a process for analyzing new development impact and sets standards for determining the adequacy of infrastructure to accommodate it. Because we're always growing and changing as a county, the policy as required by law under the state with our delegated land use authority is revisited and approved every 4 years. This is the latest of the 4-year cycle. It's one of the primary safeguards to ensure that we're planning in a thoughtful way, that we are moving forward with the goals of the general plan, now known as Thrive 2050, and that we're analyzing our growth trends and travel patterns and examining policy outcomes so that the tools that we're using are equitable, fair, and effectively pursue and achieve our policy outcomes. Council held a public hearing on the GIP on September 10th, and by law, we're required to approve the GIP by November 15th. I'll note, oftentimes the impact taxes that sometimes go alongside the GIP are conflated with the GIP. Those are two separate elements, although they do have some relationship to one another. The impact tax bill began its work through the Government Operations Fiscal Policy Committee, which I also serve on, last week on Thursday. Those conversations will continue this week, this Thursday on the 17th, and the council will be taking up the impact tax proposals and any changes to the impact tax structures, some of which have been proposed by the planning board, in due time. It doesn't have to be by law by November 15th as the GIP does, but we will likely be taking it up under a similar timeline, and we're on pace to do that currently. Really pleased to announce that we have a new base budget review process that the council is undertaking beginning this year. As many of you know, one of the main authorities of the council is to review and approve the county's budget, $7.1 billion. $3.3 billion of that goes to our school system. The county executive transmits the recommended budget on March 15th, and we take up the budget and are required to approve it by June 1st. It's a very compressed timeline, and we have long discussed an interest in doing more deep dives outside of the budget process for some of the categorical spending and ongoing spending that we do on an annualized basis. So in order to maximize our work during the really truncated council budget review process, last summer, Council and Office of Legislative Oversight staff collaborated on an initiative to develop an ongoing structure for multi-year ongoing base budget reviews at my request and the request of the council. This includes the largest categories of spending and key cost drivers for relevant organization, agency, or departments that are being reviewed that year. It's intended to be a multi-year plan for ongoing budget reviews outside of the traditional budget process, and we are moving forward with the new approach. Council Vice President Stewart and I, as her service as chair of the Government Operations Fiscal Policy Committee and as vice president, and me as council president, asked and are moving forward with a process to begin with Montgomery County Public Schools as the largest and most significant part of the county's budget, the $3.3 billion of the $7.1 billion overall budget. We're going to have 3 sessions coming up beginning next month. We're planning in mid-November to have a in-depth conversation on the key cost drivers in Montgomery County Public Schools and a detailed analysis of things like employee compensation, blueprint for Maryland's future, and contractual services. We'll likely have 3 sessions to go into these deep dive reviews, and that will help the council and the Education and Culture Committee in its work, and ultimately will provide us with a really important framework as we head into next year's budget review starting on the 15th. So excited for this effort to launch a multi-year effort to do base budget reviews, which we've been talking about for years. And I'm proud to move forward and to begin implementing. And we will appropriately start with the largest and most significant part of the county budget, Montgomery County Public Schools. Subsequent to that, in the out years after the budget beginning next summer, we'll take up other large budget and departments and outside agencies, as well as a combination of smaller departments as well as part of this multi-year effort. We also received last week the Office of Inspector General report on their review of Montgomery County's administration of short-term residential rentals, also known as STRRs. I'm not sure it's known by you or me by that, but that's apparently what it's known as. The report showcased very troubling findings with the administration and oversight of these rental properties. These STRRs typically use online broker companies such as Airbnb and VRBO that many of us have come familiar with to operate and to publicize them. The council passed legislation prior to me joining the council in 2017 to regulate these entities, adopting Zoning Text Amendment 1603 and Bill 216 to define short-term residential rentals and to establish limited use standards and licensing regulations. It includes a 7% transient tax on the total amount paid for the rental. And today it's estimated that there are about 1,400 short-term residential rentals operating in Montgomery County. The report found that the county has lost out on hundreds of thousands of dollars in licensing fees and tax revenue due to a lack of administration and tax enforcement. The county's Department of Health and Human Service was initially assigned the responsibility of managing the program, but more recently the task was transferred by the council at the request of the executive to the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. That was after we were informed by the executive branch that there were no proactive efforts within the Department of Health and Human Services to actually implement the zoning text amendment or the bill and the regulation of these rental units. Furthermore, the review found that the county is unable to reconcile tax payments received by short-term rental brokers against what was collected. And obviously, these are very troubling realizations, especially given the number of years that this has been in effect. I've already reached out to both departments to understand what happened, ensure not only solutions can be made to fix the future, but to take action to see what methods the county can take to ensure that all taxes can be collected on short-term residential rental property owners. And we're going to move forward and work on implementing the switch from the Department of Health and Human Services, where this was previously housed and it was clearly not working, to the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, in hopes that we actually move forward with a regulatory regime that we actually can implement and that actually gets done. And we'll be pushing the executive branch and our colleagues across the street to make sure that that happens. The IG report will also now go to the council's audit committee. As many of you know, the audit committee has really worked hard to build upon the work that I had led in the previous council and that the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy had worked together on to strengthen the Office of the Inspector General and to really shine a light on the significant and really important work that the Inspector General and her office are doing to address real issues that we have and that we need to address and that we need to move forward in a constructive way, not only on acknowledging what went wrong, but figuring out what we can do to fix it. And so that's really going to be the focus as we move forward. Last but certainly not least, I want to encourage residents to have their voting plan in place. The 2024 presidential general election is around the corner. There are many ways for residents to cast their ballots, including early voting, voting by mail, and voting at your local polling place on Election Day, which is November 5th. Early voting begins October 24th and runs through October 31st. Residents can find an early voting location in Montgomery County on the Board of Elections website. All eligible Maryland residents may register to vote at a polling place during early voting and on election day for the general election. If you're already registered to vote in Maryland, you can check your voter registration by visiting the voter lookup on the Maryland State Elections website or texting CHECK, CHECK, to 77788. Also note that the vote by mail request deadline is coming up imminently in the next day or two. And so please be sure to request your mail-in ballot or make your voting plan to vote early or vote on Election Day, November 5th. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Jordan, see if there are any questions.
Great, thank you, Council President. Reporters, some friendly reminder, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or note that in the chat. Up first, we have Brad Bell with ABC7 News. Hi, Brad, how you doing?
Hey, good morning, all. Hello, Mr. Friedson. Look, I've asked you about this before, but I've been asked to get back with you again today. After all of the listening sessions, what are you feeling about the attainable housing plan at this moment? Where do you think it's going to go? What's going to happen?
Well, we have a plan. We've been methodical and thoughtful from the beginning. This is a process that I had set out to do, that the council has taken on, and appreciate our staff for all of the work that they have done, including Jordan, who has done a masterful job at helping to coordinate the questions during the listening sessions and the comments. Our staff is working hard right now to aggregate the feedback that we've received, both through the portal and through the listening sessions, as we promised they would. And so we're doing that now. And ultimately, the plan is that the council is going to receive a briefing from the staff, specifically to hear from the more than 2,000 residents who registered to be part of the listening sessions, the many more who have reached out on the portal. The portal is going to stay open, but we are going to and have a process to utilize the information that we've received both from the listening sessions and the portal at the briefing before the council, which will be later this month. We're right now targeting October 29th to have a briefing from the staff, and then we'll take it from there. It's important to note that there's no legislation before the council yet. We have recommendations from the planning board. Ultimately, the legislative process hasn't started. For any changes to happen, the legislative process will have to start. But I think this is really important framework for us to begin and consider a variety of viewpoints. Even last night, I was at an event, and as one set of community members were coming up to me with one set of feedback on attainable housing, another resident approached me with the exact opposite view on the attainable housing recommendations. And so it's reflective of diversity of views, a lot of passion, understandably, that people have about their homes and about their communities and about housing, which is a very important issue, something I care very deeply about. And as I've said before, there's a lot of room between doing nothing and doing everything that the planning board has put forward, which is a very ambitious set of a series of recommendations on a lot of items, going from small scale to medium scale to large scale. And ultimately, the council is going to have to grapple with it, decide how we move forward. And we're not rushing the process, and we're going to be thoughtful and methodical as we have been.
Where do you stand right now? That's the question I'm getting a lot is, you've heard this, you've absorbed this, more than most about this.
We're processing the feedback right now. I ultimately think that there's an interest on the council to do something. I think there's a big question of what that something is going to be, and how we address some of the questions and concerns that have been raised in a thoughtful and methodical way. So I don't think we're there yet in knowing exactly what the legislation is going to be. I think it would be premature to do that. The purpose of the listening sessions was to listen. I've been both accused of not sharing my already formulated final decision and opinions and not listening. You can't possibly do both. I have listened attentively to the listening sessions. We are carefully reviewing the feedback. We're going to have this briefing here in a couple of weeks. And once we get the feedback, we're going to process it. We're going to think through the questions, comments, concerns, the points that have been made in support of some of the recommendations, and we're going to weigh the best path forward. That's where I'm at. I think that's where most colleagues are at, and we're going to figure out where we go from here.
Great, thank you, Brad. Reporters, if you have any other questions, you can note that in the chat or raise your hand. I don't see any questions at this moment, but I'll give you a few moments. Any last minute questions going once? Going twice? 3 times? Okay, back to you, Council President.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to a good week ahead.